make, of course, special attention today that Zoom is working properly for obvious reasons. Homework question, thoughts about midterms, that is approaching questions. Really, so we will continue with quadries discussions. Okay, we'll sometimes play with examples of the one-dimensional quadries, so I'll keep it on the whiteboard. We'll hope that the projector will start collaborating with us finally. Okay. John's question about homeworks. Noted. Quadries. We talked about quadries. For regions, very quick reminder. We'll assume that if it's an image, bichromatic image, it will not be the interesting case necessarily, but it's a very good toy problem to study on. We are assuming that pixels on the x are between 0 to 2 to the m, or even more conveniently between 1 and 2 to the m, or more conveniently 0 to 2 to the m minus 1. So, for example, if my pixels are between 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll give you a number in binary. Here is a number x, which I'll write in binary as 0, 1, 0. And I'll ask you for this x value, let's see the path to this node, which, if I'm not mistaken, is 3 in decimal. Let's see how the quadry looks like in 1D. This is an example that we'll play with a few times today. I'll start with the root. For convenience, the root is at the bottom. And to get to 3, what do I do? Go to the left subtree, go to the right subtree, go to the right subtree. Just to remind everybody, we have the region that every node V remembers. The same notation, by the way, will call us for other types of trees, not only quadries, so get used to it. We will think about R of V, which is, in this case, the number 0 all the way to 3. That's a region that this node V is corresponding to. X, which is 3, is right here. What is the path to X? Go to the left, go that's flexing about whatever is binary. Go to the left, go to the right, and go to the right, and that takes you to 3. Let's think about the bits, each bit by itself. From the root, I went to the left. Go to the left is 0. If x would have been 4 or larger, then this bit would have been 1, which means I'm going to the right subtree. Makes sense. So every bit here corresponds to left or right on this one-dimensional quadtree. And if it's two-dimensional quadtree, then the x, this one bit of the x tells you go to the left side, go to the right side. That's for the x, and for the y, this one bit tells you go up, go down. So essentially, if you remember that every node is an array of size 4 with 4 pointers pointing downward, then by these bits, you know immediately in which cell you're going to find the HR. So it's convenient that when you are doing point location, I give you x, y, I want to see where is x and where is y, at each iteration to know to which child I need to go, I just need to ask what is the value of a single bit, which, as you hopefully all know, you can use bit masking bitwise end, and that just gives you easy single bit 0, 1. Okay. We talked about reporting, but talk about constructing the tree. In this case, it was from bottom down, from the root down. We talked about how do I keep a set of points in the quadtree, where every time that my data is not entirely trivial, I'll have to tell you what is my splitting policy. And we'll see different splitting policies today in each one. But the rule of thumb is that every leaf of the quadtree should have a small amount of information. Just for the sake of the slide, I'll decide that this small amount is 1 point. So the leaf needs to know this leaf exists because there is a single point D in it, and the leaf of D needs to know what are all the parameters, including the exact x and y of this data point. Another leaf, the leaf of 2, says I'm empty. I don't have any data point. So why do you exist? You exist because of other nodes. We had to split because of the existing of other nodes. Quadtrees, I mentioned a few times, with the splitting is always in the geometric middle. I don't care how much data I have to the left and to the right. It has some cons. The height might be exaggerated. It might be that my tree contains only 2 points, but the height is quite large. But it has a huge pose that the implementation is so much simpler. I don't need to rechange the structure of the tree if I have insertion or deletion of points. Maybe I have to split nodes, but no rotation or moving the lines. And it's also very simple because if I'm doing point location, I don't need to ask, am I on the left or the right based on comparing it with something that's a node. I just ask, hey, node, are you a leaf? If you're not a leaf, then I'll pick a subtree based on what is mine x, the query point value, versus what is where I am in the tree. Another advantage is that it's not crucial, but it definitely plays with a constant. If for any time I will ask, hey, here is a node W. What is R of W? You have a few ways to address it. You can say every node W needs to know what is its range. For example, by storing what its leftmost lower corner and the rightmost upper corner, possible. But for many applications, you can say, I know what is R of the root, the region of the root, and I know if I went to the left subtree or the right subtree. So based on the path to a node, I know what is the region of this node. I don't need to really compare it to values inside the node. So there is tons and tons of rooms to shave constants and make all these calculations simpler. Okay, we talked about reporting. How do I report all the points inside the query region? I mentioned it's much more convenient to have the query region to be a rectangle as well, axis parallel rectangle. Why? Because then it's kind of easy for me to know if my query region, here is Q, the query region, here is a R of V, the region of V, and I can easily check by just the max X, max Y, min X, min Y, if there is any overlapping, if one is contained inside the other, and so on. So I'm using this here because it's a good type of query who lives in radius of 5 miles away from me if I'm using the L2 Euclidean distances, where this come from, and because of the slides, it's more clear what is the query and what is the region of the quadrant. But in practice, you probably want regions that are square. Amir, everything happy with Zoom/OBS, Twitch? Just I want to make sure today that
Zoom only is not
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. In the OBS, I will increase the. Right, my camera in the OBS should show also the slides. I just don't need it at this moment. So we'll get to it very soon. Okay, so that's how I'm doing the reporting. And again, we'll sit on many other type of trees that present some hierarchical decomposition of the plane. I have the root that corresponds to the whole region, and the children of the node, or the children of the root corresponds to 2 or 4 different regions, both contained in the region of the parent. Again, the region of the child always contains in the region of the parent. That's called hierarchical space partition. You'll see it also in GraphSig, in BSP, binary space partitions, some hierarchical structure. And for all of them, the same reporting subroutine function paradigm works. What does it say? Either for a query region and some node V in the tree, either they have nothing in common, or ROV is fully inside the query region, which will tell us everything inside the subtree of V is also inside the query region, or they partially overlap, none of the previous cases, and in this case, we are just pushing our search recursively to the 4 children. They can decide by themselves. Okay. Quick question. If I just want to know how many people live inside the query region instead of who are these people, I can change a quad tree to do it, right? And I can change the reporting. How would you do it? Each node of the tree will store how many people there are in this subtree. And once you get to this part of the report, for line 3, RV is fully contained inside Q, then everybody inside the subtree rooted at V also lives inside Q, so instead of report, you're adding this number to the total number of people. So it's kind of augmented data structure, if you wish, that you're adding these little fields over there, and in return, the search goal is much faster. And why is it such an efficient filtering tool altogether? Why queries happen so much faster is that, I think it's obvious, if your query is on the west coast and don't bother people on the East Coast with all this search. You're only visiting the relevant part of the tree, and huge amount of nodes don't need to be explicitly checked. Okay, talked about reporting. What happens if I have triangles, other shapes, triangles just for graphics, but it could be any shape, intersecting or not intersecting. All I'm doing right now is saying I need splitting policy, and right now my splitting policy would be I'll split a quadrant if it intersects more than one triangle. If a quadrant intersects two triangles, then split it. I can change it into split it if you are intersecting two edges. I don't care from which triangles. Or if you are containing a vertex of a triangle, cut it. Whichever you want, so you'll have a simple part. That is, if you have a different alternative, and it's a bit leading to the next topic, if I have a triangle and it has a vertex inside the square, maybe you do want to split it, because you don't like this complex shape. But if you have a square that just crosses the edge of the triangle once but doesn't have a vertex or two edges of this triangle or other triangles, no need to split it, but you need to store this edge. Anyhow, here my splitting, in this slide, I'm using the splitting policy that every quadrant should intersect at most one triangle of the input triangles. Input triangles are A, D, B, and C. And as usual, the root asks, in my whole world, are there more than one triangle? Yes, there are 4 of them. So I'll split it, splitting always in the middle. The northwest quadrant asks either more than one triangle. No, it's only A, so the root stores a pointer to where A is stored. A has a lot of parameters, where are the vertices, maybe colors, maybe height. So this node only stores a pointer to A. And as I'm splitting this region, the northeast quadrant, quadrant 1, intersect both C and A, so it needs to be split. And you see that as we keep going, A is stored in a few leaves. A bit wasteful, maybe, but A back stored even in huge number of leaves. Maybe I have a lot of processing in this part. You can definitely think about very ill-defined and viciously created data like take 2 nearby triangles and put them very close to each other, and once you need to split, it will create huge amount of splits, because eventually the quad will have to split them until you are in pixel level. If you have some reasonable stopping condition, etc. Right, so it looks very wasteful, except in practice it's not. As I said, quad trees, including for triangles, including for graphics, for any realistic data, with a very different definition of what is realistic, people made a lot of research about it, but for realistic data, quad trees are good. Okay, I want to find all the triangles that intersect the query disk. Same process. I'm checking again, hey, query disk, hey, the root, do you have anything in common? Yes, there is some point in common. The query disk is completely outside, then it doesn't intersect any of the triangles. Hey, query disk, hey, the root, are you the range of the root fully inside the query disk? No, not in this case. So what should we do? We are asking the root to call recursively to take the query disk and to check recursively each one of the 4 subtrees. And eventually I'll be in a scenario where I'm visiting a leaf. I'm visiting a leaf, a larger leaf. I'm visiting quadrant 0. Why? Because my disk intersected a bit. Intersected, and then I have to actually check explicitly is my disk intersects the only, but now it's only single triangle that is stored inside this leaf. So it's pretty simple and very, very easy to implement. Okay, a bit about mesh generation in quad trees. It's very nice also as a way to create good triangulation. So why do we have triangulation of a polygon. I didn't teach you the algorithm that the book contains. To triangulate a polygon, you can triangulate, but we did speak quite a lot about triangulating a polygon. Remember taking the vertices and connect them to other vertices of a polygon, so it forms chords until, and you add following more and more chords, more and more diagonals until you cannot split a region anymore, which makes it necessarily a triangle. So that would be a triangulation of a polygon. We had the Delanoy triangulation as a way to triangulate a point set. And by the way, the algorithm that I showed you about the triangulation of point sets, that was in adding the points one by one, it's a great triangulation in practice, even if you are not insisting on Delanoy. You're just saying I don't go into this whole business of edge flipping, but I have a once I have a triangle, I'm adding a point in the middle, connect it to the vertices, and keep on going. And maybe you have some other criteria in mind that would say I want to do some local changes around the new point. But there are lots and lots of algorithms that are based on the same idea. Okay, now I want to triangulate the whole space. My input is a printed circuit board in this case. It could be a part of an engine, and I want to ask how heat dissipates between the building, how wind will move between the building, and so on, to run some numerical parts on it, or to print it, or to study it in any way. Eventually, I want to take a complex shape, and I want to break the complex shape into small region, or into regions that are at least simple, that I'll understand. I want to have as an output, and triangulation is only one of the ways to get it, but as an output, I want to take a complex region and partition it into simple shape, and simple in two meanings here. Simple will be each shape is described as only a few edges, maybe 3 if it's triangulation, and every shape should have only few neighbors. If I ask about any process that moves from one region to another, like wind, heat, energy, population, anything that is dissipating inside this whole shape, I want to ask for one shape. What's happening inside you? Well, you need to only check with very few neighbors. It's also a necessary step in many other algorithms that tries to do things like approximating matching, or approximating traveling salesperson, or finding the Steiner tree, like the best network that connects a set of points. And a lot of algorithms said, I have a set of points, and I know that there is a path, for example, in the case of the traveling salesperson question, I know that there is a path that visits each one of my points, and this path is as short as possible among all the paths that visits all these points, but I cannot find it because it's NP hard. But if I'll say that this path, I'll subdivide the plane, I'll assume that this path is going only through several portals in each shape. It doesn't have too many ways to communicate with other portals. Maybe my shortest path goes through this part, maybe my shortest path goes through this portal, maybe my shortest path goes through this other portal, but there are just a few portals that my shortest path can pass through. Does it mean that I'll get the shortest path? Not necessarily, but if my portals are dense enough, then I'm getting something that is very close to the shortest path. So it's a great way to approximate many problems that are NP-hard. A lot of problems that are NP-hard will start by, let's create a quad tree for all the points and somehow limit the way that one quadrant interacts with the other. So hopefully I gave you enough motivation to why we want simple partitions of the space. So in general, we have the input shape, called it a component, and the output should be a triangulated mesh that I'll denote as M because S and T will be taken by a quadrant that will appear in a second. So that's not a triangulation necessarily that I get, but it is a triangulation of this whole space. So the original shape is very complicated, but now I break it into triangles, hopefully not too many of them. I don't insist quite the opposite, that all the triangles are in the same size. Quite the opposite. Triangles that are in very complex region or very close to the edges, these triangles are tiny because there is a lot of changes in the shape right here. Triangles that are far away from the shape could allow to be much larger and still give me good enough approximation. Okay. So that's the type of mesh generation that I want to find, and let's try to make it more formal. But once I have any such triangulation, I can ask how does heat dissipate as a way to check how one edge of a triangle affects the other edge, and so on. So it's not, these are not solid requirements, but it's like a good idea of what I'm looking for. So here you see a component. It's not a great figure. It's copied from the book, but it's still not great. That's one of my components, and I highlight a few triangles were highlighted as an example. And let's ask what will make a mesh that is desired. So the shapes, the components, they are printed, are given, and it's up to me to decide what is a triangulation of the shape. So let's see what are good and what is obviously what. And as we'll see, quad tree will be a good way to handle it. So I want the edges to be conforming. Conforming will mean that if I have a few triangles, I have it written, no triangle vertex of M has another triangle of M that meets just at the end of the edge of the triangle. Okay? I don't like that I have one vertex of a triangle just in the middle of an edge of another triangle. It is really so important, depends on, of course, on the applications that you have in mind. But as a rule of thumb, yes, it's a good source of numerical errors if you're doing it and then you're slightly mistaken about the calculation of this vertex over here, and suddenly this vertex appears in the middle of the edge of the other one. If you insist on having a vertex here, then make it a vertex of a triangle, and then you have split the other triangle as well. It's a good source of problems down the line if you allow edge in the middle of another triangle. So triangles, when they meet, they should meet in vertices of the triangle, not in the middle of another triangle. Input restricted. In the book, it will be edges of the component of the input should follow edges of the triangles. Okay. Cover the whole edge, and they consist, if I'm following the bound of the shapes, I am following boundaries of triangles as well. I'm not following the edge and suddenly enter a triangle on the middle. Again, you can replace it by weaker attempts like that a triangle will intersect. It's more that every triangle will intersect only one edge of the component, right? So it will be okay for this triangle to intersect the component somehow in another application. If the whole edge intersects this triangle, then I have to store a bit more information, but it will not be okay for the component to have vertex or something that change very rapidly inside the triangle. So you can play with the input restriction. At the moment, let's assume triangle must, you're following the boundaries of the component, the input shape, meaning you're walking on edges of the triangles. You're not entering any triangle, you're not exiting. You're just walking on boundaries between triangles. We want them to be well-shaped. What's our best hope from triangles to be well-shaped? But what should they not be? They should not be very thin. We talked about it. We like some locality here. It's bad that heat from here will affect points that are very, very far away, even though these 2 points have very little in common. We would not like, so thin triangles are bad. Another example of both thin and ill-shaped triangle can be even worse. What will make us happy? Triangles that are very well designed will be either 60, 50, 60 on its angles, or 45, 45, 90, which will be our case over here. That will be as good as you can get from a triangle to be. As fat, all the edges are big, and so on. Make sense? That you see, these two bad examples are having very thin angles, which we definitely don't like. But there is one more property that we want, which are that we actually want the mesh to be non-uniform. Meaning, here is my component, here is my input shape, and because this shape is so tiny, I divided all the triangles in the whole empty space over here into billions of tiny triangles that don't have anything interesting happens next to them. The shape is over here. Why am I using such a small triangle over here? Because I had to use such a small triangle just near the shape. Again, near the shape, it makes sense to use tiny triangles. There is lots of action near the shape itself. Far away from the shape, I can use much larger triangles, so that will make a much better triangulation. Let's see what happens here. Here is my shape. Next to the boundary of the shape, I will use really small triangles, because I want the edges of the triangles to coincide with the edges of the shape, and I don't want rapid changes on the edges itself. I care very much about climate change that starts from here and ends here, if you wish. As I'm going further and further away from the action region, I can use larger and larger triangles. Okay, and you already see the simulation, we'll see the relationship with quadries. It's kind of a quadry what's happened here, except that I took a square of a quadry and I split it into 2 or 4 or 8 triangles that are all well shaped inside the square. If I only need if I insist on a triangulation of a square, if I want to triangulate one square of my triangulation, I'll either use this diagonal or the opposite diagonal. Either way, it is 45, 45, 60. If I want to further divide it, you see a bit more complicated triangles, like in this case, but it's only 8 of them. Okay, so we like the non-uniform meshes. Okay. Moving to the notation of the books, slightly different than my notation. The edge length of a cell of the quadri, corner of the cell, a square and a quadrant will mean the same thing. and of course, one edge per side, maybe more, and two squares that share an edge, this guy and this guy, are called neighbors. Okay, let's see again the example of points. To use the book notation, when I talked about quad trees the first time, people didn't like that I'm using sigma, didn't like Greek letters, so I moved it to R for regions, but let's go on with the book. What used to be R, now it's called sigma. Every node V has its region, now it's sigma V instead of RV. Following the book, and we'll say if the input are points, then squares are split until they only have one object, one point, inside the region of the node. Inside the region of a node, I'll keep splitting until there is at most one point. Okay. We kind of played with this formula before. That's a bit more accurate than what we saw earlier. What is the depth, the height of the trees that we are constructing? Depth and height here has exactly the same meaning. What will be the depth out there? Let C be the minimum distance. Oh, I think that I missed the text here. C is the minimum distance between any 2 points. Check the distance between these two, check the distance between these two, the distance between these two. That's C. S is the size of this whole thing. How much do you need to split? Log to the base 2 of this ratio, S over C. Okay. But you'll see a lot of algorithms that would say, you know what, that's so unrealistic that this number is too large. Let's assume that this region, or log of this region, is 10, 20, 30, in any realistic scenario, right? Think about the United States, you start with 3,000 miles, split it, split it, split it. How long do you need to keep splitting until you're getting to 1 feet? How long do you need to split it until you're getting to 1 atom? You're still in the 20, 30, 40, right? So for any practical value, it might be an annoying constant, but it rarely will be more than tens for any, even because of measurements error, right? Your input comes from somewhere, and when you measured where these points are, you had to somehow round at some point. Square root 2, your probably your sensor, your measure distance probably cannot split square root 2 or pi with all the digits to infinity. So C is the minimum distance, S is the larger distance, and where the log comes from, because that's how many times at most do I need to split until I can separate every node from any other node. And by the way, if you are annoyed from, if this number is too large, we'll see very soon compressed quad trees that has even, that are as elegant as quad trees, but don't suffer even from this number if it's too large. And yes, at some point I was quickly collaborating with an astronomy professor that was building quad trees for astronomical processes. I mean, then you didn't split a square, you split a hemisphere into 4 hemispheres, and there is various problems when you want to use it for stars to make it, when you're using their coordinates. How do you call quad trees in 3 dimensions? Just because I didn't mention it. You can say quad tree in 3 dimensions and everybody will understand, but if you want to really be uptight and use proper grammar. Octrees. Oct from 8. Where does this oct come from? Because how did I split this region? I split by x. So I got from one region 2 regions, split by y. So now I split each one of the previous regions. Now I have 4, and now if I split by z, somewhere here, then each one of these regions is divided into 2. So and now we'll have h children, so it's oct tree. Okay, so how much time does it, if I give you a set of points, how much time do you need to build the quadri out of the, let's say, using the algorithms that I described in the first slides. You're looking at all the points, it's more than one, so now I'll split it into 4 quadrants and repeat recursively, all together in each level of the quadri. In each level of the quadri, you're spending linear time to decide who goes to which quadrant. So the overall running time will be n times how many levels do you have. Again, in each level, you're just spending linear time to decide each point to which quadrant does it have to go, and do I need to split it or not? Okay, let's talk about one of the many applications for balanced quadri. Not to be confused with compressed quadris, not to be confused with oct trees. I want to pave the way toward balanced quadris. So, I just thought that I would mention as a source of confusion that sigma and R, sigma of V and R of V. V is a node of the tree. Sigma of V is the actual square that it corresponds to. Now, another good source of confusion, for me at least, was that when we think about V, and I'll show you the square that V corresponds to, I don't necessarily mean that V is a leaf. Like, when I'm talking about the root, I don't necessarily mean that V is a leaf. Maybe V has many more nodes inside it. That's fine. Okay, so don't get confused about these two. I want to say that to node V, and you'll show me a direction, up, down, left, right. And sometimes I want to find the node V prime such that V and V prime are in the same level. V and V prime are in the same level. If they are in the same level, it necessarily means they are in the same distance from the root, which necessarily means that they have the same size. So sometimes I want to find for node V, where is the node with the same size, which is just on the north side. There is a unique such node. There might, so it's not necessarily, if there is such a node, it is unique. When will it not exist? What was my mistake? I just said that there is a unique such node to the north of it. Of course, if V is the topmost guy, then it doesn't have anybody to the north. But when is the case that V is not the north, the top guy is the most north, and still it doesn't have a neighbor on the right, on above it, of the same size. In all this discussion, I was asking, I have V, and I want to find the neighbor of the same size, just above V, but with the same edge length. Could it be that there is no such guy? It could be that it's not a leaf, obviously, because but it's internal node. Yep. So if this is V, that is, this is our V, it doesn't have a neighbor of the same size. Well, neighbors which are of larger apart. And so if I want to find, in many applications, I would like to find the neighbor of the same size to my right. Now, what happens if I have somebody like this, but I want to find a leaf with this part, let's say, because I do ray shooting in graphics. I like it if I have one neighbor above me. Two neighbors is still acceptable. What I would prefer not to have is, now I use from the lower side, that I have a lot and lot of neighbors. And now when I want to ask who is my neighbor from below, there is billions of guys that I need to check between them. And balanced quad trees will somehow prevent us from needing to worry about too many neighbors immediately below. Okay, so let's say that V exists, before we are down to balanced quad trees. Let's say that V exists with its region, V prime exists with its own region. How do I define it in the tree? Efficiently. So I gave you V, and I assume here that from a node V I can find the parent. It's a good question, how do I always find the parent? And one thing I think about quad trees is that there is a method to arrange them so that I don't need to keep pointers at all. But assume that I can find the parent in constant time. We can actually play with our example over here. These quad trees that I'll get to in a second, I have this node, don't look at all the leaves. The leaves are only this guy, this guy, this guy. So if I'm inside this guy, which corresponds, it's a one-dimensional quad trees. It's built on the point A, B, C, D, F, G, H. These are the points, and for whichever reason, I decided to represent it using the following quad trees. So what are the regions here? The region of the root are the x value of all the points, and the y and the region is just the x value of all the points. So if we're already here, let's take a quick look at this. Quad tree, why do I decide to split them in different way, or how do I decide to build the quad tree? The quad tree is potentially on all the leaves for all the points, on all the x values, but I also have the y values of all the points. I'm putting the mesh generation a moment for rest, just to finish with this example, because I think that it gives us, in general, a good intuition. I have a set of data points. Let's say my data points are only 1D, because it's easier to draw, and each data point comes with a y value, let's say the elevation above the sea level. And I want to build the terrain out of all the samples that I did with the layer. I was flying above the terrain, check for every data point how high it is above the sea level, and now I want to build the terrain, or to cluster the points in a meaningful way. So what do I do with this quad tree? The region of the root, R of the root, R of V1, are all the points all the way from E to H. I'll decide that I can cluster them if I can pass a line through all the points, and they all behave like a linear function. All the points behave like a nice enough linear function toward this line that approximates the location. And if I decide that the error that I'm getting, which is the sums of these red segments, or the sum of the square of these red segments, look at the best line that you can fit. Here are the coordinates of this line. Look at the errors that this line were produced. If it's good enough approximation, then what will you do? You store in the roots. Here are the coordinates of the best line that fits them. And I see no reason to further split these points. If that's my error measure, my error is close enough to all the points. The way I place the points right here, D and E are quite far away from the best line that is fit, so I split them. Spacing policies will be that you are not, the splitting will be in the middle. So it will be in the middle of the X. Remember, Y is a height, that's not what I'm splitting. the y is elevation, x is the only parameter. Where are we using it? We are triangulating a two-dimensional terrain, so we have the xy coordinates, and we want to decide is a mountain is pretty much plateau, or at least linearly interpolated, so I can represent it all with a big triangle, or do I need to further split it? So in my example, I'm looking at the 4 points A, B, C, D, and I'll now, why? Because I split my x value into the two regions, which are represented in my quad tree as a left node and as a right node, right children of the root. And I look at the nodes on my left side and generate the line that go through the left point. Not there yet. Not there yet. Now, I fit a line only through the points that the root represents. I decided that this arrow is tolerable. This arrow is tolerable, so all I store in the root are the coordinates of this line. Don't get confused, the line is infinite, of course, but all I store is the part of the line that is relevant for the x value. I'm only starting out here. I need the parameter of the line, but it's enough to store it as a segment. Go to the right subtree, let's turn this one off. Go to the right subtree, go to D1, D1 corresponds to all these points. Try to fit a line through them, I don't have this line ready. It doesn't work because they are too far away, so keep splitting it so that at the end E and F will be on their own line, and what I store in V is just a parameter of this segment. And G and H will be stored separately in the root of this node, and I don't really see any reasons to split them further. In two-dimension, it will be similar. It will just be not line, but triangles or quads that you can easily approximate. If you want to make it continuous, then just make this segments continuous, but remember it's going from left to right, so you can connect all of them, making them a terrain, or just say, this is a good enough approximation, and now if I want to know roughly when to render, or for graphics application, or to estimate what is roughly my value when I fall over here, I just need to ask what is the root and what is the line that fits it, and where am I with respect to this line. Good with everybody, however, other criteria of splitting data, there is not more involved than just the color or how many points are. The splitting criteria of this quadrant is, can I cluster the point in a quadrant and interpolate all of them with a very simple function? Say linear function for all the points inside the same region and with some predetermined error level. You can guess in graphics application, it will be depending on how the viewer is, how close the viewer is to a region, I can decide it doesn't introduce enough annoyance to the eye if I use the crowd level, the curve interpolation, or if I'm very close to this region, then I'll go down the tree and use a finer approximation depending on how close the angle of view, or does it disturb enough angles? Is it like, if adding more points are still in the same pixel, then maybe I don't need to change it. Okay, back to the neighbor finding. I want to find the neighbors on the right side, and actually that's why I brought this guy over. So if I'm here and I want to find my neighbor on my right, I just go to the parent and ask who is my neighbor to the right, or the north, or the west, or the east. If not, then if I'm here and I want to ask who is my neighbor to my right, you need to go to possibly all the way up until you can finally start to branch to the left. So this guy, you have to go all the way to the root to find your neighbors to the right. From this guy, you have to go to the grandparent to find your neighbors to the right. Okay. However, it will be really, really convenient if my neighbors are of the same size of me, same square size. But that would be a bit too much to ask. I don't want uniform quadries. So let's see the two extremes. Uniform quadries, uniform mesh, all the squares were of the same size. But then we had an example of an input where we had a tiny square over here and billion triangles, extremely tiny because they had to agree with this square. So that's better. But on the other hand, I don't like also the examples of one huge square over here that I need to do some calculation, but now it needs to take into account all its billion neighbors that are all very tiny triangles. Balanced quadries are just the right comparison, the right balance between, well, no pun intended, the right balance between these two constraints. So what are balanced quadries? Balanced quadries will say, look at a square and look at its immediate neighbors. Its immediate neighbors should be either of the same size, or possibly twice as large, or possibly twice as small, but not more than twice. I don't want one node whose immediate neighbor is 4 times smaller than this node. Okay, so same size with my neighbor is fine. Leaf compares to leaf, of course. Not necessarily leaf compares to other node. So 2 leaves that are sharing an edge are either of the same size, or one is almost twice as large. So this case is not allowed. But this case is fine. So this guy has neighbors which are half of its size. Okay, so we have an algorithm that creates, say, quadri for a set of points, or for any shape for this method. Similarly, we talked about set of points, but in the same way I can insert all the points or build the quadri of the same shape up. But we'll build the quadri efficiently, but no commitments about balancing. This guy has nodes that are much smaller than it. So let's balance it. We're not going to rotate anything. No rotations. Instead, I'm picking every leaf and I look at the neighbors of the leaf. Neighbors from top, bottom, left, right. And if one of your neighbors is smaller than you, more than twice smaller than you, then you need to be split. You used to be a leaf, now you're becoming an internal node. You'll have 4 children, and now these children need to check they need to check the correspondence with this, whomever caused me troubles. But there is some cascading effect over here, right? I can have these tiny guys that will cause some nodes over here to be split, that will cause some nodes over here to be split, that will cause some nodes over here, so it's propagational effect. So once I decide to split, then I put in a queue my neighbors right now, because possibly they need to be split there. Again, if I was split and I'm closer, maybe my neighbors that used to be the same size as me are or twice my size. Now they are suddenly 4 times my size, so they need to be split as well. Okay, so at least I need to check them. So the algorithm is very simple. Put all the leaves in a queue, each one will be checked, and every time that you're being split, put your neighbors in the same queue. And the algorithm stops once you're done. Once you are running out of leaves. Check this neighbor, cause these neighbors to be split, these neighbors to be split, and so on. so wait, I all convinced you that quadries are small and practical and stuff, and is this all going, is all lost now when I want my quadry to be balanced? No, there is a beautiful theorem that states that start with a quadry not necessarily balanced, quadry not necessarily balanced, that you build anywhere you want, that has m many nodes. It refers both to leaves and internal nodes. And now I'm running the balancing algorithm. And of course, I'm adding nodes out of it. So the new quadry will be larger, but not much larger. It will still be order times m. In the very worst running time, it will be 8 times m. And by the way, it all happens in linear time. Linear in what? The input or the output? Well, both, because they are only different by a constant. Okay. So we want to show that there is at most 8 times m splitting operations. And every split operation, what does it do? It takes one node. It will keep this node, just not as a leaf anymore, and add 4 children. So obviously we want to bound how many such split operations we are going to have. Okay. And the rule, or the main thing, the main tool in the proof, and I'll hand away a bit, here is I'm looking at sigma, and I'm looking at all the 8 neighbors that sigma has that are of the same size. And you have this proof in the book. Here is sigma. And look at the 8 neighbors of sigma from all its size, all of the same part. And I want to prove, the proof is based, you might, don't know if we'll go through the whole details, that if sigma has to be split, it will be because one of these neighbors is an old guy. One of the ones that were in the original case. Let's think that sigma prime, in this case, I'll change the definition of sigma prime soon, but let's say that sigma prime is an old one. Old meaning it's not created during the splitting process. It was existing before I started the splitting at all. Sigma is about to be split. Sigma will ask money from its neighbors to be split. You're going to charge money. We saw this type of argument. We are going to pay dollars per every split operation, and let's see that we have a budget for everything. So sigma will, if there is an old neighbor just next to it, then sigma will ask, sigma prime, give me $1, and sigma prime will start by having $8 with it. So it will pass $1 to sigma, because it's old. That will be the rule. The old guys will pay for the new guys. So sigma prime might be charged $1 because sigma prime might be charged $1 because sigma is split, and it might be charged again $1 because sigma double prime is about to be split as well, which is also a neighbor of sigma. And sigma, as we said, sigma prime, as we said, is an old guy. He needs to pay also for sigma prime. And maybe also for sigma triple prime, that is also about to be split. They're all going to the old guy and asking for money. But for how many nodes sigma will have to split? Well, I want to convince you that if any node is going to be split in this process, it must have an old neighbor. How many neighbors of the same size does sigma prime has? 8. So it needs only $8. And there is enough money to all the nodes to be split. provided that I prove to you that every time that I split a node, one of its neighbors is an old guy. So I thought that it might make sense here. Before, instead of going through the whole process, let's play with our one-dimensional quadrics to get some intuition. So I'll draw by red. Are the old nodes. So the leaves of my quad. Restart. This is an and that's a leaf also. So all this part doesn't exist yet. My quadri ends right here. So this will be, let's do it, double red. Double red will mean a leaf. So who are the leaves in this scenario? These guys. And this is. These are the only nodes. Tell me what happened during the split process. Who needs to be split? I'm going through it because that's just the way that I understood this theorem, so let's play with a one-dimensional case first. Remember, we want to argue that if you're split, you have a neighbor next to you that is odd. So who needs to be split? Where do you see a node here whose neighbor is less than twice its size? Not hard. Each node here has a region associated with this. It's just one-dimensional region. And this node has a region of everything over here, just because of the location in the quadri. This node looks at a immediate neighbor. It shows a boundary. The size of this guy is 1. The size of this guy is 4. Not balanced. So I need to split it. If I'm going to split it, where do you see a node that I can charge? Who is a node that is going to pay for? That's W. Where do you see a node that W can ask to pay for it? It can only ask for old nodes to pay for the splitting. More than one case, but I'll ask somebody at the same size as me, which is a neighbor of me. I still need to prove to you that it exists, but of course, W will ask V over here to pay for it, so I'll take $1. $1 for V will be passed to W. And now W is balanced, and now these two nodes, blue is due, then I have these nodes. In this example, I don't need to split it anymore. Let's say that there are more nodes over here so I'll have to cascade this impact. Let's create more and more nodes, but they are all in the left subtree. So let's say that I still need to split. Whom do you see that needs to be split here? This guy on the left needs to be split because there is much smaller nodes over here. This guy on the right does not. That's a cause, which is a good thing because it doesn't have any old neighbors of its size. It has only a new neighbor. This guy was created after the split was started. Remember, we want to say that the number of youngs is not more than 8 times the number of new. The number of youngs is not more than 8 times the number of olds. So this guy, W1, stays the same. W2 needs to be split into this one and this one. Who pays for W2 to be split? The old guy next to it. It's not the leaf. that is somebody in my own level, this neighbor. I claim that it exists. It must have been in the old tree, otherwise this tiny little leaf over here, would not exist. I have somebody in my own level to charge. That is new, that is just near me. Okay, so the proof in general will say every node that needs to be split will find in one of its neighbor an old guy of the same size. It cannot be that I have to split it without having an old guy. Near me and this old guy needs to pay for me, and there is only 8 such. And this guy has to pay. Sigma prime that is paying for my split needs to pay only for 8 guys in this way. Okay, let's skip the proof. It's a bit technical. Just an example of where we are using quad trees together with elevation data, say, plateau, flat parts, no attractions over here, no needs to split. I can use very large triangles, cliffs, very rapid elevation. You need to use much smaller triangles. Again, you can use this quad tree to partition, and then we said at the last end of the quad tree, every quad wants become a triangle. So just some numbers. If L is, so if age is the height of the quad tree, and let's get back to the case of a component. Here is my component. You know, the shape that I'm creating the triangle form. And I'll insist that I'll end it up by having triangles of size 1 on the boundary. I really want the triangles near the boundary of the shape to be as small as possible. So how many triangles do I need to generate around the shape? It would be L, 30 seconds and I'm done. L triangle for the perimeter where L is the length of the boundary, the perimeter. But these are many triangles do I need to do if I insist that every such triangle is of size 1, as small as possible. If there is 30 miles of boundary over here, then I need 30 miles triangles. But now I need also budget for other triangles when I build the quad tree, and then I balance this quad tree. How many triangles do I need? In general, it will not be L anymore, but it will be order of L. And in the whole subtree, in the whole quad tree, including children, including everything, the age is the height, the depth of the quad tree. L is the total length. It's pretty cool. I need just the bare minimum times the constant. The height of the quad tree times the total perimeter. And I will have the quad tree which is balanced and triangulated and everything. How much time? That's the number of triangles, the number of nodes in my whole quad tree. How much work did I, sorry, that's the number of triangles at the end, correct. That's the number of triangles at the end. How much time did I need to invest for all of it? It's linear times the height of the tree. So it will be the number of triangles times the height of the tree, because there is still log n height levels to check. So that will be the construction time. So it mostly depends on if you're obsessed with having tiny triangles just near the boundary, but then when you are further away, when you're 2 miles away, you need triangles of size 2. When you're 4 miles away, you need triangles of size 4. So remember, n plus n half plus n over 4 plus n over 8 all sums up to 2n at the end. And you see something very similar out of it. Altogether, you don't need more than twice or a constant than the absolute minimum that you just need to pad the boundary. So I think that it's pretty cool and it's pretty nice use of quad tree, and it's really fast to implement. I am done, 2 minutes late. I'm done for today. Yeah. Okay, I am happy to answer a question on Zooms. I can open the Twitch at the same time, but it's for my ADHD, it's a bit much to pay attention to all. In the future, I'll ask people that are online to have also a little window of Twitch. Zoom people, any questions? Let's see if Twitch people have any questions. Okay. Everybody went home.